Hi there and welcome to my channel. The channel that I still call Work in Progress. Maybe there's another word for it now I could use, because maybe I should call it Following the Yellow Brick Road. Just kind of watching and sensing my way through the life that this channel will take on of its own. However, I'm still of the mindset that I feel if we can gather together and each tell our stories of our life's journey, share these stories, that we, one, will help one another, particularly during this time that we're going through right now. And we can also learn that we're more alike than not alike. So I know I bring this up at the beginning of every video. And I just feel I have to keep doing this for a little while, because in case you're out there and you hear this and you have an interest in it, but you don't watch the video all the way through, then this is why I'm doing it, if that just made sense what I said. I'm looking for people that'll have a conversation with me, which we'll do on Zoom, about your particular life journey, stories from your life journey, that you think could help another, or you just to share and talk about the challenge that you're going through right now. Again, just sharing these stories like as if we're sitting around a campfire and all of us sharing our different stories. So if you have an interest in this or it appeals to you, then my contact information is right below this video. So give me a holler and let's see if we can make this happen. So today, what I want to talk about is, right now I feel there's so many challenges that the universe is just kind of bestowing on all of us that are here during this really interesting time of an evolutionary process. So I feel there's a lot of, what do I want to call it? Things are kind of being sped up in a way, or what we're being asked to do, or what's even being demanded of us, is to really start to look at all aspects of our life, every facet, to begin to release the old, release what no longer serves us, so we can be helpful in moving into this higher vibration, which we're trying to do as a human species during this evolutionary process. So what I've noticed for myself, and as I've listened to some others, they've shared similar situations, but what I've noticed for myself is I can't not look at what's going on inside or within me, or an old program that gets triggered. And that I believe my guides are very creative in coming up with all kinds of ways to help me see what it is that I need to let go of. And many times it's kind of a trigger. A trigger is, somebody says something or something happens, and it triggers some wound or belief or program that I've been carrying around that I need to release. And it's through that triggering process in the now that makes me aware of it. And, it just comes up in so many different ways. It's not like one size fits all. We all have our own particular, unique, if you will, ways of dealing with things and things that have happened in our lifetime. So this has been very interesting for me, because as what I'm going to tell you about, it's been going on for at least a year, about a year. And I didn't really get the triggering until really just recently. I'm obviously a slow learner. So here's the deal. There is a woman that is living in her car in the driveway that is pretty much right across the street from my kitchen window. So I have a bird's eye view. Now, I don't live in a neighborhood that typically has people living in their cars, at least I'm not aware of it, or homeless people, scattered about. That doesn't happen to be this neighborhood. And this car that's in the driveway for this woman um, actually is a rental where I believe her father owns it, where she has lived inside the property. Um, and there were a lot of problems that went on. I believe her brother was also sharing the property with her. And there was a lot of times the police were called. Again, a kind of weird thing for this particular neighborhood. So it's been around. But anyway, for the last year, without going into the rest of the detail, she's been living in different cars. Yeah, this is a interesting thing. So she'll get a car and she seems to start to live in it, and then she'll, drive it around, whatever. But shortly after getting a car, she tends to have, it looks always like battery problem, and then the car doesn't start. And in fact, we nicknamed her the mechanic because she's with the hood up and I don't know what she's doing, but she's trying to get the car to start and they don't. And I think more than once now, maybe a couple times, I've seen one or two of those cars being towed away. This is all during this past year. Now, I have been obsessed with this woman and her life and her watching her. Now, there's no doubt she's definitely on drugs. Now, I've made up the story, but I think I have reason to believe, just from watching what's gone on, is I believe she's, prostituting at night, and then, so I don't know if she's in the car all night. I don't know. There's some nights it appears she has been. And of course, we've been really cold and rain right now in Northern California. So I've wondered about her. So she comes and goes, but in the meantime, this particular car now that she's been hanging in has been there for a long time, and at times she's disappeared, so to speak. I've even thought maybe she died. I mean, I've gone through all these stories, and then she returns again. I think that she has what I've been calling her pimp that shows up, and I haven't seen him as often now. But the scenario is, number one, she's living in the car. She's oftentimes got the hood up trying to do something with the battery, or God, I don't even know what. And I've seen her in all kinds of, what do I want to call weird ways, times where she definitely seems completely out of it, extremely high. Other times she seems okay. And like I said, I've been obsessed with this. And I had this feeling, I'm a major empath person, so I do get involved in people's lives unbeknownst to them. But I just have this sense with her that she's really a good person, an okay person, that's been very damaged. But and then I watch how she lives in this car, and I've been kind of engrossed. I never have known anybody who actually lived in a car or watched anybody on a day-to-day basis of how one lives in their car. And so during this, particularly with this particular car, she has had times where she evidently locks herself out of the car. And she's had where she gets help, where they put the hanger or whatever it is to unlock the car. So that's how she's worked with it in the past to get back in. So it's been all these weird things. And then it could be, well, like last summer, super hot. And I'm thinking, how is she staying in that car at night? And anyway, I'm watching this like so engrossed and so obsessed. And the only reason I gave myself for being so involved in this is just that I've never seen anybody living in their car before. So it's I don't know why I'm obsessed, but it intrigues me. And also, I have a lot of empathy for her, compassion. I feel really like I wish I could help her, although I know I couldn't or can't, because she's choosing in this sense to be living this hard life, or what appears to me hard life, during the coldest of cold weathers, their warmest of warm. And then in, I don't know, how many months ago, about the time maybe winter was really starting here, maybe even a little before, it appeared that a window was knocked out. I'm guessing to get in, or maybe she locked herself out. I didn't see it happen. But anyway, one window was missing, and it started raining, and somehow it got plastic put over it, and that's kind of where it is today. So she's in and out of this scene because sometimes I don't see her for weeks on end, and that's when I've thought maybe her brother, who they had a very violent relationship. This is when some police would have to be called there, and she'd be, yelling for help or yelling to the brother, "Don't touch me, don't get away from me," whatever, all this violent stuff. And anyway, so I made up the story that I think the brother killed her, and she's gone, she's dead. And she was gone for, I don't know, a month or so, and then maybe longer. And I'm still looking all the time out there to see what's going on, this obsession going on. It's in my mind, I think about it, etc. And then one day, not so very long ago, she shows up again, and I'm watching her do her thing, again, getting back in this car, and I'm trying to see what's going on. And then for a while, she's just showing up in the car. Oh, and the other thing that happened is during this rainy season, she's disappeared, but the brother's still living in that house. And I think he took her clothes. So all her clothes are, I believe, in the car, because I'll see her change clothes. I don't see her change them, but she enters the car and dressed one way and comes back out dressed another way. And so when all this rain started and she was no longer around, I think it appeared he took the clothes, some of the clothes out. Then the window was gone, so it's raining into the car. And then finally one day, he's now gone somewhere. I don't see him anymore. And she shows up, and she's pulling this wet clothes out of the car. And, so I don't know where she had been. She looked really bad toward the end. She was super thin and pretty well always seemed to be high. And then all of a sudden she shows up, and she's looked like she's back to looking like maybe a more normal person, and she's discovering this crap in her car. Literally, I'm watching all this. I mean, I could write a book, a novel about this thing. So again, I'm obsessed, and I'm just thinking, well, I guess I'm obsessed because I've never seen anybody living in a car. I don't know. I don't know what's going on that I keep so involved in this. So finally, I don't know, a day or so ago, it, like a download from my guides, I think I'm kind of looking at this thinking, what the heck is going on with me with this? And this whole story for myself, it's not a story, it's this whole truth reveals itself. And what was revealed is that this has been triggering a fear inside of me, a major fear inside of me about being homeless or living in a car like she did, because I'm watching and thinking, I couldn't do that. I couldn't survive. And so this trigger, once I saw the trigger, I could start to wind it back to say, where is this trigger coming from? So start digging in to find out. And I've mentioned this before in past videos, but just so this makes some sense. In growing up as a kid, my mother would oftentimes be on the phone, this is while I'm in elementary school, to my grandmother, saying, we're going to be on the street. Now, at the time, I took it literally. Now, at the time I'm growing up, I don't even think they had the word homeless. They didn't have the word homeless people. I'd never even heard of or seen homeless people. I think they called them bums then. I don't know, but it wasn't in my world. So when I would hear my mother complaining and crying to my grandmother that we're going to be on the street, I took it very literally. And just as a sidebar, my mother is very high maintenance, and my father owned his own business, and they owned the house. Well, they were paying, I'm sure, a mortgage for the house, but we're living in a home they own in a nice neighborhood. And my mother's acting like in today's world we were going to become homeless. So I don't know how that, I mean, it was very confusing to me, very confusing, because nothing made sense. She had domestic help. My father, as I maybe mentioned, owned his own business, and, you know, owning his own business, no doubt there were ups and downs. And I don't really think my dad was probably the shrewdest businessman, but regardless, nothing made sense that we were going to be on the street, which I figured or assumed or imagined that meant we wouldn't have a house to live in. And like I said, everything was very confusing because the lifestyle and how we were living didn't even show anything about like living in poverty or not having enough of anything. And anyway, that's the life I grew up in, this very confusing world. Anyway, when my mother would say we're going to be on the street, this is where I took it very literally. And so I would walk home and to school and home from school, the elementary school, every single day with my girlfriend, who lived just a half a block from me. And as we would be coming home from school, she would turn off this half a block from my house. She would turn down her block to go to her house, and I'd continue on the half a block to my house. But when my mother started doing this to my grandma, to her telling my grandma we're going to be on the street, I was very, very frightened. And I would ask my friend either I'd say, before you go to your house, could you just go look and see if my mother's on the street? And because I'm scared. And so she would go, or sometimes I'd ask her just to walk with me to see if my mother's on the street, because I didn't know what I would do. And so she would, and of course we never found my mother on the street. And I think when I tried to ask my mother about it, it was like, don't worry about it, or forget it, or who knows what she said. I don't know what she said, because I grew up in this confusing place. So anyway, as I got this whole story, I mean, the story I'm telling you is how I got triggered. And I realized from the time I'm in elementary school, this started a wound, a worry that I could end up being on the street. And it just never got released. It stayed with me. And then, you know, at a different time in my life, when I'm getting divorced and I'm a single mother, and that was a time where we were mothers, my group, we were always nervous about being, and that by then I think we called it homeless, and we were nervous about taking on this responsibility. It was really rough for me and tough to get this divorce. I was really terrified, and I really didn't have much support going on because, again, my mother did not show up to help me, that's for sure, or anybody really in my family. So that got, again, re-triggered, you could say, or just added to what was already there from being a kid. And so off and on through my lifetime, I've definitely had that thing being triggered. But, you know, at some point, I hadn't thought about it in, I don't know, a long, long time. And so I didn't recognize that when I'm so obsessed with this woman living in her car across the street from my kitchen window, that it was actually triggering this very old wound, we could say, that I've had going on. And so, whoa, as I looked at that, I was kind of shocked, like, oh my goodness, this is where I'm becoming so obsessed, and I'm obsessed about seeing what it's like to be on the street, so to speak. And it's terrifying me, because I don't think I could do that. I don't want to live like that, and I didn't know where all this fear was coming from. So now that I see it, I believe I can release the fear, just the fear. And now I began to see how much fear has been going on around the COVID time, and the that we all went through, with the fear of getting COVID, the fear of people dying, the fear of other people being around other people, the wearing the masks and so forth. And I see where I was taking that over the top as well. And I started to just see a domino effect, and how from several other things that I don't really need to go through in this video to make this point, but I began to see a domino effect and how one fear can trigger another fear and trigger another fear. And these are triggers, which means it's already inside of us. So if I didn't have that trigger for being on the street, then I wouldn't have that obsession going on with that woman. I may not have ever even realized she was living in her car. You know, I would have been maybe oblivious to the whole thing. So here's the point, to look for yourself. When you find yourself kind of either obsessed with something, or, you know, the fear going on, or worry about something, you've got to dig in and find out, where is this from, so that it can be released. And you've got to start to see the domino effects, how one thing can lead to another. I think COVID time, the whole pandemic, is a great example of all that we went through. I think many of us end up with PTSD from this, you know, a really kind of almost a phobic sense of getting back into it's not going to be a normal life, but getting some way back into life again. And you know, when to stop wearing a mask, and when to be gathered with other people. And, you know, I'm not talking about not being prudent and smart about what we're doing, but at the same time, it takes on a life of its own, which is really what happened with this woman and me, so obsessed and seeing her live in her car. It really literally took a life of its own. And like I said, that's triggered me to look at some other things. And I've been really clearly getting that this is the time that we're in on this planet where, you know, we can't sidetrack or not look at what's really going on. A lot of times in my past, I've said, you know, I've white-knuckled it through fearful things. And now I realize that really wasn't completing the process. Like, I would keep the trigger would be there, and I'd force myself to go through things I was fearful of, thinking that's a good thing. I don't know if it's good or bad or whatever, but that it didn't release it. So here I am now at this point, looking at this whole thing about being on the street, which is 100 years ago when I'm in elementary school, and seeing how today that got triggered, and that I'm there, you know, here, like I said, I don't live in a typical neighborhood that has people living in their cars, or even people living on the street. And, you know, we've lived here quite a while, and before this woman showed up, there was somebody, the guy rents his place out, so there was other people living there, no biggie. And then all of a sudden this happens, and I think, okay, our guides will find whatever way they need to start to, in a way, stimulate this activity so that we can release what we're still carrying, and we're oblivious that we're carrying it, or that it's like baggage. And I've spoken about this before to different degrees, but I think it's so important right now for any of us to be really vigilant in looking at what is going on inside of us. Why are we reacting or not reacting in a certain way? You know, what keeps us up at night? It's not just say, oh, because yada, yada, yada. Don't get in your head with it, because if you get in your head, you're not going to get it. I've learned that. And so you have to kind of go beyond what logic is. It's not logic, right? There was no logic, really, other than I tried to make logic out of my obsession with this woman in her car. And so now as I see this, we'll see how I can shift and release the fear. And I think I'll know I won't have this obsession and this uncomfortable feeling. That's what it is, a very uncomfortable feeling, obviously. And so, and again, for me, I see so much of, I can see quite a bit where I really bought into a lot of the fear Not to say it wasn't fearful, but just my own triggers during the pandemic. And so it's time now that I kind of take an inventory, so to speak, and begin to release these fears by digging in and finding out what is being triggered. So I'm sharing this because some of you may be going through the same thing and not aware or not recognizing how this is happening, and not recognizing the domino effect. And maybe if you're feeling a lot of anxiety, which is going on anyway, I admit that in the collective right now. But if you have specific things like this thing that just happened to me, take a look at where did this begin, because it all begins really in childhood, is where something starts and you begin to take on a belief. And usually it does come from fear. It's caused by fear, and because it's not a positive. And then you forget that, we forget that that's happened, but we don't realize that this stuff stays in our body. And that any time that we are having an issue with something outside ourselves, whether it's a person or a situation, circumstance outside of ourselves, it's not that circumstance that's the issue. What that circumstance is doing, or the person that you think you're having an issue with is doing, is triggering something inside of us. I've heard someone a long time ago call it like a U-turn. So when I'm thinking that something's disturbing me out there, I need to make a U-turn and come back in, and then dig in and say, what's going on? What is this belief or this programming or this cultural thing, or what is it that's causing me distress? Because it's not from out there. It never can be from out there, period. There's not any situation that says, well, occasionally it could be from out there. No, 100% it's in here, and it's something being triggered. Now, I know this, and for, I didn't really, I got so involved, obsessed with this thing with the car, I didn't stop to think, like, what's going on inside of me. And when I did stop to ask that, it was, I feel I'm an empathic person. I've never seen this before. I had everything kind of going around, but not at the truth until now. So I'm going to talk about this for sure more often, but I'm hoping this will help somebody, or some of you, that maybe you're having some of these situations going on. There's no doubt everybody is, really. There's no doubt that we're all being pushed, in a way, you could say, to look at our shit, really. We can't not look at it and move through this evolutionary time. So it can feel pretty yucky, pretty awful on one level. Although I have to say, on another level, as I started to get clearer and clearer with this in the last day or so, I actually get pretty enthusiastic about, okay, all right, I'm seeing this. That means I can work through this. I do not want to live my life in fear. Forget it. It's not worth it. In fear of getting COVID, in fear of going to a hospital because I had COVID, all this crap that, gets put into our ego mind. And then we're just living a non-authentic, fearful, not worth it, quite honestly, life. So this has been a biggie for me, to kind of get a hit like this, the shift like this. That's not just about this woman living in her car, but it's showing me all the other ways that I've begun to, I've begun to either feel fear or change my life, kind of, or live my life through something that I'm fearful about, so that I'm not being following the flow of, I'm kind of caught in this web of fear, if you will, and not realizing, not being aware of what's really going on. And, maybe also right now the universe is bringing up so much of this unprecedented, what we've never been through, such as the pandemic and a bunch of other things, so because we have to wake up. We have to wake up. And that's a challenge, you know. It's challenge for me. It's challenging myself to literally come face to face with my fear and start to move through it consciously and of being aware, not through logic, not through the false self, but through feeling what I'm feeling so I can release it. Don't shove it back in. Don't try to resist it. Don't try to ignore it. Feel it. But even though you're feeling the tough times, the fear that's going on, the discomfort that's going on, it doesn't feel good. But you get to realize then, but I have to feel this in order to release it and move on, move forward. So that is my little speech today. Like I've said before, a lot of times what helps me is just doing these videos and really speaking in words what's been going on in my head. And somehow that really helps me get a better grasp on what's really going on. So I hope that helps someone out there. I always say this because I always do hope that it helps someone out there. And this is just a small slice of what this could be like. And, I'll share some more about how I'm going to now be, I've got to watch, I'm going to be aware of what am I doing with this woman and living in her car. And maybe since I kind of gotten clear on it, the whole thing will disappear and she won't even be, it'll end. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they'll tow that car away because it's a junker car now. And the brother's gone, and then it'll be back to whatever it was before all this. Or not. Or maybe it'll continue on, but I'm not going to be obsessed with it. What I'm going to do is be real clear with myself about what's going on and where did this begin. So that is it for today. Other than I want to remind anybody listening that I really do want to have these conversations. I was going to call it an interview, but I feel like I want it more like a conversation about your life's journey, stuff that you can share. We record it on Zoom, and then we can start this and then have it on this channel and see where that goes. But in the meantime, you could also comment. That would be great. If you have a comment about what I'm talking about, please feel free to comment, because that could also start another level of conversation. Now, this channel's new, so it takes time to get exposed and get out there if that's where it's supposed to go, which that's where I follow the yellow brick road, right? But again, if somebody could comment, that would be good for sure. Also, if you like this video, please click like and also hit the subscribe button. And then right next to the subscribe button is a little doodad button where you can be alerted as to when new videos are posted. I post quite often now. So I think that's enough said for today. And I always say be kind to yourself, because that's one of the harder things to do, in my opinion, is, excuse me, is being kind. Not only to yourself, but to others. But in the meantime, take care. Until next time.